There are things we probably already know impact our running. Then some things we know impact it, but might not really know how or why. And then there are things we may have had no idea could impact our running at all. So let us try to help you with 10 things that affect our running more than we realise, and what to do about them. And I'll do you this deal, I'll trade you. Learn something new? Consider subscribing to the channel. So what could be number 1? Have you ever watched the financial video that talks about benefits of compounding? As in, you regularly put something in and that something grows exponentially over time. Sometimes it's money, but in this case it's your running ability, and both are achieved with consistency and patience. You see, many runners believe that it's the hard sessions that have you vomiting in the bin at the end that are the best. They're the ones that count. But what if you can't train for days after that session? Splashy sessions, as I call them, feel nice, but incrementally chipping away and embracing consistency, that's the way. Nothing necessarily splashy, just session after session of showing up, and the compound effect is going to take place. And the thing is, we all miss sessions from time to time. Life happens, that's understandable, but try to never miss 2 in a row and watch those compound improvements. Consistency over splashy sessions all day long. Something that can dramatically affect your running positively and negatively is your technique. Now, really boiled down, here's the essence of it. There is no such thing as a bad technique. If you run continually and you don't get injured, don't try and change anything. We're not at the level where it really makes a huge difference. However, if you're getting injured regularly, then you might need to look at your technique. Here's the way that you do it. Gait analysis. It is one of the best investments you can make if you continually get injured. Have someone look at your running patterns, your running techniques, and see where you need to change it. Then you change it, but you do it in small increments. You don't go out and just use the new technique. Again, that can open you up to injury. So what you do is 2 minutes of concentration on the new technique, then relax for 5 minutes of normal running, 2 minutes again, and you build that up over time so that eventually your brain recognizes the new pattern as the way that you want to move and you don't have to think about it, because it is exhausting in the early days. But ultimately, there's a balance in these things. If you don't get injured, you don't have a bad running technique. If you do, look to change it. And there's loads of videos on this channel about running technique and drills that can help it and what you should be looking for, but ultimately, I would suggest go see the expert, because honestly you have no idea how much that it can affect your running. One thing you might not be surprised to hear affects your running, but you might be surprised to hear how it affects your running and what you can do about it, is running in the heat. And I think we're probably quite well qualified to talk about that, living in Thailand, right?
Absolutely.
So to understand what's happening to your body, I need to drop a little science on you, and that is your body is always looking for something called homeostasis, as in that middle zone where everything works perfectly. And running in heat knocks the body out of homeostasis. It makes it too hot. So it spends a lot of your running, like we're running, trying to cool us down to bring us back into that middle ground. And it does it in a bunch of different ways, like dilating the veins, bringing them to the surface to cool you down, by making you sweat more so that the wind hitting the sweat, it evaporates the sweat and cools you down. Loads of things, but what comes from that is an elevated heart rate. And let me tell you from lived experience that once your heart rate gets too high, once it needs you to slow down, that's when you can get into real trouble, because when you then slow down because you can't run any longer, you lose that wind hitting the sweat and evaporating and cooling you down, and it just gets worse and you just get hotter. So what do you do about it? Well, here's 5 quick hit solutions for you. First one is temper your expectations, drink more, fuel more, understand that the fuel need goes up. Monitor your heart rate in races and training so it never gets to that stage where you have to stop because it's too hot. Wear clothing that exposes as much skin as you're comfortable exposing, because it's the process of the wind hitting the skin and evaporating the sweat that cools you down. Or get some stuff that wicks away sweat well. And point 5, take your ego out of this, otherwise you get yourself in trouble. Look, I'm not going to go into huge detail on this one because it is well documented. I've made so many videos about this, but the quality of sleep and the amount of sleep that you get is basically the cornerstone on which good quality of training and good quality of life is based. And I'm also not going to sit here and say it has to be 8 hours, because everybody has their own individual sleep need. But you've got to get your sleep needs. So here's the ways that you find out what your need actually is. And that is, maybe on days when you don't need the alarm, do an experiment. Go to sleep, wake up, how long did you actually sleep for? When did your body naturally wake you up? Over a period of time rather than one day. For some people it's 9, for some people it's 7, for me it's 8. You can rarely get away with less than 7. I know people say they do, but physiologically speaking, probably not wise. And the second tip is, stop pressing your snooze alarm. You see, the thing is, physiologically, the way that this works is when you wake up to an alarm, your body is flooded with a bit of stress hormone to wake you up. If you press snooze, go back into your sleep pattern, and then have more stress hormone the next time the alarm goes off, and then again, you're continually flooding your body with stress hormone to start your day. Now, is that a wise way to respond to the sleep that you've just had, starting the day stressed? I don't think so. So essentially, get the sleep that you need. Everything else is built on it. That's it. Whilst we're absolutely advocates for just throwing a pair of shoes on and getting out there running, it is worth mentioning that if you have a bit of spare cash, you do well to look into some trainers that are the best fit for you. I don't just mean in size, but also certain trainers are made for certain running styles. So if you run more on the outside of your feet, for example, then there are trainers to help with that. And in fact, there are trainers to help maximize and protect most running styles. And in most independent shoe stores, they can give you a reasonable gait analysis to help you pick the right shoe, or you could even have a more in-depth style one that looks at your whole running technique. What we're talking about here is minimizing injury risk, which maximizes consistency and therefore makes you faster. But then again, we've got carbon-plated shoes that can make you faster just by wearing them sometimes, but that's a whole other video. Ultimately, you can throw on most trainers to start getting you out there, no problem with that, but getting the right trainer for you can really help your running go to the next level and keep you away from injury.
One thing that I've learned firsthand and that could affect your running is your diet, or what you're putting in your body to fuel it. It's not rocket surgery to know that what comes out of your body in training needs to go back in. So any kind of restrictive diet can really limit the quality and what you can get out of your running, training, racing, especially when it comes to carbohydrates. So I learned firsthand, I used to have a really restricted diet and I couldn't even run then. I had no energy to do so. But I've improved my diet and I eat a really well-balanced diet now, and I don't ever struggle with having energy, but I have learned that it's really also important to find what works for you individually as a runner. What I'm trying to say is you've got to experiment and find out what works for you, because I know that what works for me doesn't work for Ben and vice versa. So you've got to try things out, figure out what's good for your body when you're running and go with that.
And always try ice cream. That's the main one.
Always works for both of us, that one.
Hands up, who's ever gone out on a run and not performed in the way that they thought they would, even though it's a run they do all of the time? And I'm talking about in some way like maybe heart rate's higher or pace is lower or it just doesn't feel as good and you don't know why. Well, here's something that really impacts your running more than anyone really gives it credit for, and that is the stress that is happening outside of running in your life. Maybe it's a work stress, maybe you're busy at work, maybe it's the family stress of having young children and you're not sleeping well and all of these things are building up. It could be relationship stress. But if you don't recognize that this stress can come into your running because it's all what's happening internally in your body, then you could be heading in the right direction for some poor training, poor quality of training, or even worse, injury because you're trying to push through something that you shouldn't. And I have two solutions for you. The first one is just recognize that, understand that you might not perform well, and that's okay. When life is stressful, just the pure fact you're getting out there, that's enough. But number two is, I use an app called HRV for training. Some people use an Aura ring, some people keep their watches on overnight, and it tracks your heart rate variability. Long, complicated process to explain. I'll put a video up here linking about it, but in essence, it can factor in your work and life stress, and it can suggest when you are too stressed to train or when you might need to take your training down a level. And it has got me through my Ironman training, my marathon training. I pay for the app, I'm not affiliated. There are many ways that you can track your heart rate variability. But to not take life and work stress into account in your running, you might be doing your own running a disservice. So it's worth looking into. One thing that does affect your running, but you probably, if I'm honest, you probably do actually know this, but it's what you do about it that's the important one here, is genetics. And let me give you a really good example, or I think it is because I've thought of it, but a really good example to demonstrate my point. If I was born at exactly the same time in the same place as Mo Farah, and I copied Mo Farah's training, the same level of training he did to get himself to world champion, does that mean that I would be world champion also? No. So we all have a different genetic makeup, the things that make us uniquely us, things we inherit, and the things that we're born with. Sometimes that's how you respond to training, sometimes it's your kind of how often you get injured. There are lots of things that make up our genes, but what it means is, in essence, we're all on our own ladder instead of being on someone else's ladder. And what you're aiming to do with your fitness journey, with your running journey, is climb up your ladder. I suppose in theory what I'm saying is, I could make the same progress as Mo Farah, but we would just be at a very different starting point genetically. And that's the difference between him being a world champion multiple times and me being a 43-year-old runner that lives in Thailand and also teaches. I guess what I'm saying is, focus on your journey up your ladder. Nobody else is good enough to try and be better and to try and every now and then make progress up maybe one more rung and not worry about what anyone else is doing on their ladder. Did that sum it up nicely enough, Mary?
So you're just saying, don't compare yourself to anyone else?
Yes, thank you. All right, this is one I'm really passionate about, so I might go off on one, but bear with me, because something that can really affect your running more than you can possibly even imagine is your attitude towards running. And I think it's summed up perfectly by this Henry Ford quote, which is, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Because a lot of it just comes down to belief in yourself. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take you on a journey about how we build belief in ourselves, how we approach running and struggle, and then how we build on top of that. So eventually you can't do anything but run. You don't even have a choice in the matter. And let's start here. This is what I do with the children that I teach, is I build in safe struggle, opportunities to find some kind of adversity or some kind of challenge and then go for it in a safe way. So here's what we can do as runners. This is the first thing I would suggest doing. If running is a big challenge for you and you're struggling to find the consistency, what about things like this? On a 10k run 10.1 kilometers. If it's raining out, go out. You're seeking out struggle. And if you're someone that consistently pursues struggle, eventually that becomes a habit in everything you do. And in the background, what you're doing is you're building an undeniable stack of proof that you are who you say you are, who you want to be. So then let's say you've built this habit of pursuing struggle, but motivation is still letting you down. You swap the word motivation with discipline. I'm not a motivated person necessarily, but I'm very disciplined. I make the run happen no matter what, because I've built it on a base of habit of pursuing struggle. If I relied on my own motivation, I've already lost. I make it happen because it needs to happen, and I know that. So next time you want to run. I know it sounds really simple, but it really is that simple to me. So now what we got to do is go back to that Henry Ford quote, because if you believe you can, you're right.
Everybody knows that being ill is going to affect your running, but what I'm going to talk about is recovery from illness and how that can affect your running for some time. So whilst you might feel better inside, your body's still recovering and repairing from the illness, and that could affect your running quite substantially. A really good example is COVID. When we had it last summer for the first time, we were hit hard and our heart rates were elevated for about a month afterwards, whilst our body was still repairing and recovering. So we had to be kind to ourselves and just lower expectation. We're in running for a lifetime, so we have to appreciate there's no rush. Take your time.
The thing is, treat illness like an injury. It takes time to repair from, and sometimes you might feel all right. You know, when you have an injury and you're walking on it and you're like, oh, actually, that's all right. It's the same with an illness. There's so much going on internally that you're not aware of. You have to be careful and you have to take your time coming back. The elevated heart rate was an excellent example of knowing and understanding that something's going on.
So what you need to remember here, and I do as well, is to be kind to yourself and accept that your body's been through a trauma when it's been ill, and it needs time to repair and recover inside. And you might have side effects. Just go with it, take your time, don't rush.
How long are we in it for, Mary?
A lifetime.
Exactly. Hopefully this video has brought you some value, and if it has, consider subscribing so that I can enrich this juicy grey matter that little bit more. And if you like this video, you're definitely going to like this one. We're going to go from physical to mental, because it's how we avoid the darker sides of running and it comes to mastering our minds. Thanks so much for watching. We're heading back to the UK in a couple of days. It's going to be crazy running hard in not an oven. I'll see you on Sunday.